Hello, I'm Dynamic, and this is my lightning comparison of the Unique Melody 3DT, Drop JVC HA-FDX1, and Tanchjim Oxygen. Let's get to it. A note before we begin, if I don't call anything out on the FDX1, I am using the stock nozzles with no dampening. Let's start with Thriller. The 3DT seemed to have the least depth in Soundstage, which is a surprise given the driver's obvious other capabilities. The FDX1 had probably the largest width and moderate depth, and the Oxygen had sort of the most well-rounded, where it wasn't as wide as the FDX1, but I think it was a little deeper, so it sounded more like the footsteps in the song circling around you. So I think the Oxygen really took this category. All of them seem to image well within their soundstage capabilities. On to Dillard 0742 with the Oxygen. The Oxygen bass notes are deep and strong, but they're balanced by appropriately high treble hits. So at the beginning of the song, when it's alternating between deep bass notes and high treble hits, it feels balanced. The 3DT, by contrast, has very intense high hits there, almost to the point where they just about get scratchy, and the bass isn't as deep, but it's very competent. With the FDX1, you have slightly more articulated bass that isn't as elevated. This makes it sound just a bit crisper and cleaner. On the other end, the high hits are almost as intense as the 3DT. It also had the hardest hitting slam to my ears. Onto Metallica S&M version of Master of Puppets. Starting with the 3DT, this song is intense on the 3DT. The upper treble spikes just give Metallica's music a bite to any of the sort of upper frequency response instruments. It makes it hard to raise the volume to loud levels because it will get very shouty very fast. But I could also understand its appeal. It really turns up the intensity of the song. Now the FDX on its stock nozzles are not quite as shouty as the 3DT, but they're close. The interesting thing is if you pair them with the most damped nozzles, which I think in my set are green, they become almost relaxed by comparison. Metallica really chills out, and it's very easy to listen to, and you can probably up the volume significantly without becoming invasive in any way. The Oxygen, as is the theme, is a bit more balanced. It's a little bit of a smoother presentation across the entire song. The highs aren't high enough to get invasive as in the other two, and the lows are strong and deep and compensate for those highs. It's really the best balance of the three out of box. Its smoother sound may cause some to think it has maybe a little less detail or resolution. I don't particularly feel that way, but it definitely comes across as smoother. On to Pentatonix Imagine, starting with the FDX1. The FDX1 had a really good balance showing here. Even with the stock nozzle, it didn't cross the line at the highs of the singing, and the lows were appropriate for vocals. So the FDX1 really did a good job. It maintained a nice balance and made all of the voices quite believable. The Oxygen has a deeper and richer vocal presentation, which mostly affects the bass and the bass beats. It also sounds really good, but it doesn't sound as natural. It feels like the bass is over elevated. And that's typical with Pentatonix on any headphone with any kind of Harman-tuned bass. The treble is clean and relaxed and doesn't get in your face in the same way as the other two headphones. On to the 3DT. Surprisingly, with the treble, it doesn't cross the line to the same level that the other songs have. Yeah, it's intense vocals, but it doesn't become almost scratchy or like so much that it would be painful to raise the volume, that kind of thing. In addition, the 3DT is doing something with layering and depth and separation that makes individual vocals sound just a touch more separated, and it's a very nice effect. Onto piano, guys, 1,000 years, starting with the 3DT. The 3DT's previously mentioned depth and layering, I think, came into full effect here. The instruments sort of had an articulation that went above and beyond the other two. The airiness of the treble was also excellent. It was not intense in the way other songs have been. It was very much felt like it was completing the spectrum of sounds rather than overrunning the rest of the song. The FDX1 came off a little bit like a wall of sound on this track. It seemed like everything was being presented and merged together, and the layering just wasn't quite there. Even in the upper treble, where with the undamped nozzle, it should be very open and airy. It just didn't come off that way, and it was a little bit of a surprise to me. The Oxygen's elevated bass adds a richness to the bass-focused strings in the song, but at the same time, I think it's taking away from the airiness in the treble. So this doesn't have that airy feeling like the 3DT, but it doesn't really have the wall of sound effect like the FDX1 either. In conclusion, I want to talk about who these individual headphones are for. The FDX1 is ideal for the beginner audio enthusiast. It lets you tune some of the harshness out of it if you don't like the upper treble, and it gives you a good generic sound. You'll be able to figure out what you want and move on from there with this headphone. The Oxygen is for those that already know they want good, smooth fun. The 3DT is for those that have music libraries that benefit from that intensity in the treble. One note on the 3DT, it does have pretty intense driver flex pressure, and I was not able to completely resolve it through tips. That about wraps it up. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and thanks for watching.